So you've got yourself a fancy new sim racing wheel, or maybe you're looking to get one, and it has a ton of buttons. You probably have LED illuminated buttons, backlit buttons. You probably have these rotary dials here. You also might have thumb encoders on the sides, maybe quite a few of them, and you also probably have these nice joystick looking things, and most likely you're going to have nice magnetic shifters, and you might even have analog clutch paddles as well. So the question is, that's not even getting to a screen and the rev bar, and maybe you'll have LEDs on the side as well. Where do you start with mapping all this stuff? What is the right way to map this? What's the wrong way? Well, I'm going to let you know how I map my wheels. So from like a pro sim racer perspective, hopefully it's going to be really helpful, at least as a starting point for you, where you can then experiment around. So I'm going to let you know exactly what I do and why. So firstly, and often the first thing I do, is I map these buttons, the left one and the right one, to look left and look right. The reason I do that is if I'm sim racing and enforced in cockpit view, I want to check visually where the other cars are around me at times. Let me give you an example. If I'm at Daytona and I've overtaken someone on the outside on the banking, if I'm coming over the start finish line into turn 1, I want to visually check like what's on my left. Yeah, the spotter might have called it clear, the spotter might say still there, but in any event I want to visually see. So if I'm not in virtual reality, I'm using that one to look left and that one to look right. Really easy for me to press. No massive consequence if I press it by mistake. It's not going to stall the car or anything, so that's what I map there. I tend to map this one, by the way, this green one, to my get in and out of car, or like end session. It's not as easy to press as these ones, which is obviously a bit handy for a function like that, but it's also still very easy for me to know where it is, if that makes sense. It's one of the most easy to like get to and actually press. So that's my pit and getting out of car. My pit limiter I normally put here, so that'll be my pit limiter, and actually I'll normally bind this one to change camera. So if I'm in something like Le Mans Ultimate or a sim where I can change camera, I'll use that one to change camera. I'll show you later on something else I do on changing camera. That leaves kind of these two free, which I'll get onto later on. Let's get to these dials here, because increasingly we're seeing sim racing steering wheels come out with dials like this. You can see if I get the camera right, as I move this one around, it actually illuminates the specific number, which is really cool. So what do I do here? I map one of these to ABS and one of these to traction control. And I go into the sim settings and I actually individually make sure that of all the 12 options here on this ring, they're mapped to the 12 options in the sim. That's really important, because if you're driving cars that have traction control and ABS, basically like GT3 cars, hypercars have traction control but no ABS. But if you're using cars that have traction control and ABS, it really varies according to car and according to sim what the best way to drive those cars is. So some sims at a sim level, you don't want to really use the ABS or TC. Some sims you actually do want to use it. I speak to a lot of GT3 drivers in real life. That's very exciting. They use TC and ABS in real life. It's there for a reason if the car supports it. But here, this means that as you jump from car to car, sim to sim, you can actually adjust it on the fly. What I tend to do, this gives me more confidence, by the way, in my sim racing, because I know that when I have this mapped, I can start with my TC and ABS maybe a little bit higher as I'm jumping into a new combination, but then I can lower it as I get more comfortable. Maybe I don't want to have so much aggressive TC on the exit of corners. I can lower it very specifically using these rotaries. And at least one more in the middle. Commonly we're seeing on wheels these days, and I think it started with Bavarian SimTech and their adaptive beam tech technology. I think it's now in SimHub. This is a Conspit wheel, it has it as well. But you can basically, on a lot of wheels, rotate through the dials here and it completely changes what everything else on your wheel does, or other rotaries in your wheel do. So you could put it to a setting that's now changing the volume, and it could be changing like your game volume in the sim and your chat volume. So there's like almost infinite possibilities you can do with the technology these days. So that's, I think, often why we see a third rotary there, because most people are going to use ABS and TC, but that one is to go through this like multi-select, which is like crazy powerful. If you have a wheel that has 3 rotaries, double check where you have that. Let's get onto these light encoders here now on the thumbs. So really easy access. These ones I tend to bind to brake bias. Again, if you're doing endurance racing, you're sharing a car, as you do your practices, you should be working out what your ideal brake bias is. And very often in endurance races I've done, every driver has their own individual preference brake bias. So here you can just nudge it forwards or backwards. As often, you don't need to do like wild changes, but it's small preferences. When you start sim racing, when you get to the point in your sim racing where you're like tuning into your brake bias, you're really getting into sim racing. So that's what those are good for. They're nicely placed here. These ones here, I wouldn't actually use them for anything while driving per se, but I tend to map these to field of view and move the seat backwards and forwards. So as I jump into new cars and different sims and I want to adjust things slightly, maybe there's a little pillar that I just want to like get a little bit of view on the other side, even if it's not the most like, mathematically correct field of view, actually it's going to be better for me. I can make those slight adjustments here in the pit lane. So that tends to be really handy. You can see that a lot of things I'm talking about essentially make a keyboard and mouse, to an extent, redundant, which is really exciting because you can just jump onto your rig, start your sim, and get racing and not have to like faff around with the mouse and keyboard. That leaves these ones in the middle here. Again, what I tend to do here, maybe a little unorthodox, if I'm doing an endurance race, I might map these to like cycle through drivers or cycle through cameras or something like that. So you can go back and forth through cars, back and forth through cameras. So again, it means that I don't need to use a mouse and keyboard to spectate. I can kind of have that all there. Let's get on to what I call the joysticks. They're way more than that. So there's two on this wheel. And I would say if you're buying a fancy sim racing wheel, either get one that has two funky switches or understand why your wheel doesn't. So for example, some wheels don't, like the SimLab Formula 1 wheel doesn't because it's a replica and they don't have that in Formula 1. But if your wheel's not trying to be a replica like this, what these allow you to do is obviously move up, down, left, right, sometimes in more directions as well. So you can go through black boxes, MFDs, stuff like that. Then you can actually increment it, so you can increase the values, go down the values. Think about going down to your fuel, just putting a little bit more fuel in or less fuel in. And you can also select. So these are absolutely fantastic. This one here on this particular wheel I've mapped to change the screen. Now, screens on wheels are a nice to have. I'm not sure they're essential, but the more hardcore sim racers I talk to from the real racing community, so basically like real racing drivers who sim race, they all love their screens. They use it for stuff like fuel, for deltas, for getting really specific information, so they can really customize that. And again, I would suggest choosing what you want here and then sticking with it. I tend to have the dashes that I like and I stick with them. It's very unlikely, I think, that you're going to be swapping between different dashes, but that's what I've done here on this joystick at the moment. There are also buttons on the back of this wheel. So you can map those to things that are super easy to press, for example, flashing your lights, really satisfying, or you can pre-map a specific message that you want to send, a chat message like GG, good race, or like get out of my way, or like sorry, or whatever you want to map, you can map that here. So again, you might look at this wheel and think, oh, it's just a load of buttons, like what am I going to use them for, opening the doors or something? No, you can really actually replace your mouse and keyboard, which is just a more satisfying way of racing, in my opinion. We've got the rev lights here. Again, you can customize these. You can have it the standard style, it goes green to red to shift, or you can do the style that comes in. I quite like the style that comes in, and then you shift in the middle. Bear in mind that for some reason, across many different wheels, it seems to be quite difficult to get your rev lights to sync to your car in game. If you're using SimHub, often you have to reload it or let it learn or something. So if they're not syncing, just do a little bit of research to work out why, because it's going to be a much better experience if you get them synced, because these are going to be so much brighter than what you get in the game. It's going to subconsciously really let you know when you should be shifting or where you are in the power band. For example, if you have a little bit of a moment and you lose revs, you can kind of perceive here where you are, how bad it was, do you need to shift down, stuff like that. Often in wheels as well, you have kind of a similar strip to this down the side. That can be used for your ABS, your TC, wheel slip, stuff like that. That's really useful. Again, going back to what I said at the beginning of this video about how different sims, different cars, are faster with different types of dipping into the ABS and TC, i.e. sometimes you do want to dip in, sometimes you don't. Here with the ones down the side, you can set that to flash up when you're in the ABS, which is super helpful, so helpful. Or something in like a hypercar that has no ABS when you're locking up. Super, super, super helpful. So I'm a massive fan of those. This wheel actually doesn't have it. You'd have to get that sensation a different way. We've got the shifters on the back, up and down, no rocket science there. If you have more shifters, you can use them sometimes to go through black boxes. It's quite satisfying. Because sometimes you want to flick through a black box, but you don't. This is a really important point. By the way, make sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, leave a comment if you enjoy these sort of like chilled sim racing videos. I really appreciate it. But sometimes you don't want to go into a black box to increment something. Sometimes you just want to see like time remaining, go to my relative, what are my tyres saying? You just want to cycle through. And in those instances, I don't actually think the funky switch is the best way, because you're worried that as you do that, you might go up a bit, and then you're worried that you might increment it a little bit. So sometimes just have the left or right on your additional shifters. You can't mess it up. It's very satisfying to do. That's what real racing drivers do as well, especially in Formula E. They cycle through dashes like that. So that's really cool. These clutch paddles, I personally don't really use clutch paddles in sim racing. It's not an area of my sim racing that I've yet decided to really master when it comes to grid starts using the clutch paddles. I'll do that in the future. But what you can do with these, that's very interesting. If you're disabled or maybe you struggle to reach pedals, you can often in wheels bind these to the brake and the throttle. So you can have hand controls for your throttle and brake, which is great for accessibility. So again, if that's something that sounds interesting to you, do your research when it comes to buying a wheel, because there might be wheels for basically the same price but have massive additional functionality for you. Leave a comment, by the way, under this video if you're looking at buying a wheel, you want any tips. So when you look at this wheel, it might look like it's just a ton of buttons and it's all kind of fancy and it's all style over function. I would disagree. I would say this is very functional the way you can set it up. Everything I've told you about for me is very useful. That's how I set up my wheel. Hopefully you find it as a good starting point, and let me know if you want to see more videos like this, maybe with specific brands, how I set them up. This is a Consbit wheel, but this video is not sponsored by Consbit. I just thought it would be cool to show a see-through wheel, which is like insane. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.